Have you ever wondered what it feels like, at the very moment when your heart beats its last? When the breath leaves your body, and the world you knew slips quietly away like mist at dawn? We avoid the question. We dodge it in conversations. We tell ourselves it's not our time yet. And yet, death is the one guest we can't refuse, the silent companion that walks beside us from our very first breath. It's strange, isn't it? How something so certain can feel so distant, until it isn't. Until one phone call in the middle of the night, a hospital corridor you didn't expect to pace, a farewell you never imagined making. In ancient India, there lived a young mother named Kisa Gautami. She was like any of us, hopeful, filled with dreams, cradling her infant in her arms as if nothing in the world could touch them. But fate is indifferent to our attachments. One day, her child fell gravely ill and died. Blinded by grief, Kisa Gautami carried the lifeless body from house to house, begging anyone to give her medicine to bring the child back. The villagers, heavy with sorrow for her madness, could offer nothing. At last, someone pointed her to a man said to be unlike any other, the Buddha. She reached him, tears streaking her dust-covered face. "Please," she begged, "please bring my child back." The Buddha looked upon her with infinite compassion. "I can help you," he said, "but first, you must bring me a single mustard seed from a house that has never known death." Kisa Gautami's hope flared. She knocked on door after door asking for the seed. But at every home she heard the same thing: "We too have lost someone. A brother, a mother, a child, a beloved friend." House after house, grief after grief. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she returned to the Buddha, empty-handed but no longer lost in madness. She had seen with her own eyes what the Buddha meant. Death visits every home, touches every heart. No one escapes its reach. This ancient story has survived for thousands of years, not because it's about a single woman, but because it's about all of us. It's about you, and it's about me. We live as though our days stretch on forever, as though the people we love will always be there for one more conversation, one more embrace. But Buddhism reminds us of a simple, profound truth: everything that arises passes away. The seasons turn, flowers bloom and then they wither. The breath we take in must one day be released. Yet if death is so inevitable, why does it haunt us so? Why does it send cold fingers down our spine when the thought dares creep into our consciousness? The Buddha taught that it is not death itself we fear, but the unknown, the dissolving of the self we've clung to, the loss of control over what we think belongs to us, our body, our identity, our plans. But what if, instead of avoiding death, we faced it? What if we made peace with it, not as a distant doom, but as a quiet teacher, always reminding us to live deeply and kindly in the moments we have? Death, in Buddhist wisdom, isn't a full stop. It's a comma, a doorway, a passage into another chapter of the great, unfolding story of consciousness. The body falls away, but the mind stream continues, carrying the imprints of every thought, word, and deed like seeds scattered by the wind. And here's the paradox: the more clearly we see death, the more vividly we come alive. When you realize that each sunrise is a finite number you'll ever see, that every laugh with a friend could be the last, your heart begins to open in a way it never did before. Grudges seem foolish, simple joys taste sweeter, and fear loosens its grip. Buddhism doesn't ask us to morbidly obsess over death. It invites us to understand it, to strip away the illusions of permanence and possessiveness, to stop clinging to what can never be held. And in that letting go, we find a freedom most of us have never known. Imagine for a moment if you could meet your final breath not with terror, but with gratitude. Not as a victim, but as a traveler completing a long, strange, beautiful journey. In the old texts, it said that the wise are like the moon, serene, even when clouds gather. The sage prepares for death not through desperate rituals, but by living well, loving fully, and releasing attachment day by day. And so, as we begin this exploration of what Buddhism truly teaches about death, let us not shrink from the subject. Let us lean in, because in understanding death, we learn how to truly live. And as we peel away the layers of fear and superstition, if there's one truth we all quietly suspect, it's this: nothing lasts forever. Yet somehow, we resist it. We fall in love hoping it will never fade. We build homes as if the walls won't one day crumble. We look into a mirror, believing the reflection we see is ours to keep. But deep down, in some unspoken corner of our being, we know everything we cling to is already slipping through our fingers. Buddhism has a name for this: Anatta, the impermanence of all things. The Buddha spoke of it not as a distant philosophical concept, but as a living reality. He asked his followers to observe the world carefully. Notice how the morning mist dissolves with the sun, how the strongest trees, after centuries of standing proud, eventually fall, how even the grandest empires crumble to dust, and more personally, how our own thoughts, emotions, and desires flicker and shift like candle flames in a breeze. It's tempting to believe we are exceptions, that our relationships will endure, our youth will linger, our possessions will hold their shine. But time is a patient teacher. It reminds us in whispers, and when we refuse to listen, in shouts. Think of the people you once couldn't imagine living without. Where are they now? The places you thought you'd stay forever, how many have you left behind? The versions of yourself you've shed, the beliefs you've outgrown. Impermanence isn't an occasional visitor. It's the ground beneath our feet. And yet, here's where the Buddhist teaching turns from somber to strangely beautiful. The impermanence of all things is not meant to fill us with dread. It's meant to wake us up, to snap us out of our sleepwalking lives where we chase endlessly after what cannot stay. A Zen master once wrote, "The cherry blossoms fall, the seasons turn, and the heart learns to let go." It's in recognizing that nothing lasts that we begin to treasure what we have, not as something to possess, but as something to experience. A sunset doesn't stay. That's what makes you stop and stare. A kind word, a shared silence, a fleeting glance, their beauty lies in their fragility. The Buddha taught his disciples to meditate on this impermanence daily, to sit quietly and reflect. Everything I cherish will one day change. Not to cause sadness, but to strip away illusion. To understand that clinging to what must pass is the root of suffering. This is what the ancient texts call dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness of life, born from craving permanence in an impermanent world. But here's a secret. When you stop demanding that things last, you begin to live with an astonishing kind of freedom. When you know this breath may be your last, you breathe it more deeply. When you realize a friendship might fade, you speak your heart while you can. When you accept that your youth will leave you, you savor its reckless joy without fear. Impermanence is not a curse. It is the pulse of life itself. Even suffering, even grief, they too will pass. The darkest nights eventually give way to dawn. The heaviest sorrow over time softens into something tender and quiet. And so Buddhism invites us not to fight impermanence, but to flow with it. To let it teach us how to release, how to forgive, how to embrace this strange, unpredictable, wondrous life with open hands instead of clenched fists. It's said that one of the last things the Buddha spoke before his passing was this: "All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive on diligently." A reminder that our time is brief, that we are passengers on a swiftly moving river. And the wisest way to travel is to let go of what you cannot hold, cherish what you have while it's here, and move gracefully with the current. Because somewhere down the line, everything you think is yours, your possessions, your titles, your fears, Your very name will fade like ink in the rain. And when you understand this, not just with your mind but with your bones, you realize you were never meant to hold on. You were meant to live, to feel fully, to love fiercely, to release gently. The impermanence of all things is not life's cruel trick. It's its most generous gift, because it teaches you what matters. It teaches you where real meaning lies, and it frees you from the prison of needing everything to stay the same. So the question isn't whether things will change. They will. The question is, when they do, will you be ready to let go? To find peace not in what you possess, but in the very act of living, moment to moment, breath to breath. And somewhere within that acceptance, you'll discover a quiet kind of joy. The kind that doesn't depend on how long something lasts, but on how deeply you're willing to experience. So if everything we cling to eventually slips away, what about us? When this body breathes its last, when the voice inside your head falls silent, what happens then? This is the question humanity has asked since the first person witnessed a loved one fall, never to rise again. And while different cultures tell different stories, Buddhism offers a vision not of eternal heaven or endless nothingness, but of continuity. A seamless unfolding of cause and effect, life after life. At the heart of this is karma, not the pop culture version where someone cuts you off in traffic and you imagine they'll get a flat tire, but something far more intricate, far more intimate. Karma means action. It's the invisible thread connecting our intentions, our choices, and their consequences, not only in this lifetime but beyond it. The Buddha taught that our actions are like seeds scattered by the wind. Some take root immediately, others sprout years later, and many, will blossom long after we've left this world. But here's the part that catches most people off guard. There is no permanent, unchanging self that carries karma from one life to the next. Instead, Buddhism compares it to a flame passed from one candle to another. The second flame isn't the first, yet it wouldn't exist without it. They are different and yet connected. This is how life continues after death, not through a soul trapped in endless cycles, but through the chain of causes and effects we leave behind. Every thought you hold, every word you speak, every act of kindness, every moment of cruelty, they ripple outward. They shape not only this world, but whatever comes next. And when this body dissolves, those ripples don't simply vanish. They become the conditions for new life to arise. A new stream of consciousness, conditioned by the karma left behind. It's important to understand this isn't punishment or reward. Karma is not a cosmic judge. It's more like gravity, an impersonal yet perfectly precise law of cause and effect. Hurt others, and you plant seeds of future suffering. Cultivate compassion, and you sow the causes of future peace. And these seeds, gathered over countless lives, explain why we're born where we are. Why some come into wealth, others into struggle. Why one child is gifted with health, another burdened with pain. It isn't fate. It's the echo of choices made long before memory began. But don't mistake this for fatalism, because here's where it gets hopeful. Right now, in this very breath, you are planting seeds for what comes next. The future isn't written in stone. It lives in your hands, in the way you greet a stranger, in whether you choose to forgive, in whether you cling or release. And death, in the Buddhist view, is not the end. It's simply a doorway. Not a punishment, not a final erasure, but a continuation. A migration of causes into new effects. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes this passage in striking detail. It speaks of a luminous awareness, freed from the body, encountering visions shaped by its past karma. Familiar figures, terrifying or beautiful, reflections of the mind's deepest tendencies. And based on how that consciousness responds with fear, attachment, clarity, or delusion, it moves toward its next birth, a human life. an animal form, a heavenly realm, or a darker place shaped by its own making. It's not random. It's not arbitrary. It's you continuing, reshaping, becoming. But the most profound message the Buddha left us wasn't about what happens after we die. It was about what we do while we live. Because it's here now that we hold the power to break this cycle, to stop chasing what fades, to stop reacting blindly to pleasure and pain, and to awaken. The entire purpose of understanding karma and rebirth isn't to obsess over past lives or fear future ones. It's to realize this moment matters, every word, every thought, every small kindness. Because though life is impermanent, though death is certain, and though karma continues, awakening is possible. And when it happens, the cycle no longer binds you. You don't stop existing, you stop clinging. You stop fearing. You see the endless becoming for what it is, a dream. And in seeing it clearly, you are free. This is why the Buddha didn't promise a heaven. He promised liberation, a state beyond birth and death, beyond karma, beyond the restless hunger for more. The wise don't cling to life, nor do they fear death. They move through both as a traveler, passing through a beautiful, fleeting landscape. And that's where we turn next, to what Buddhism truly says about the self. If death is the doorway and karma the thread that carries us forward, then how should we meet that final moment? Most of us, whether we admit it or not, spend our lives dodging this question. We build, we chase, we distract, anything to avoid looking directly at the truth, that one day this body will grow cold, this breath will stop, this chapter will close. But what if the real tragedy isn't death itself, but how poorly prepared we are for it? What if, instead of a terrifying end, it could become the most luminous, meaningful moment of all? In Buddhist tradition, how we die matters, not because it determines our worth, but because it shapes the quality of our next becoming. And more than that, it reflects the life we've lived. A restless, grasping mind doesn't suddenly find peace in its final hour. A person consumed by resentment doesn't magically forgive as the heart slows. In those last moments, everything unprocessed, everything unfinished, rises to the surface. Which is why the wise don't wait for the deathbed to prepare. They start long before the final breath. So what does it mean to die well? It begins with understanding impermanence, not just as an idea, but as a lived truth. To look at your loved ones, your possessions, even your own reflection, and know, this too will pass. Not to despair at this, but to cherish it. Because in seeing the fragile beauty of life, we begin to live more awake, less attached, less afraid. The Buddha taught that one of the greatest practices is to reflect on death daily. Not in a morbid, anxious way, but like a traveler checking the horizon, aware that evening is coming and determined to make each step meaningful. Some ancient monks meditated in charnel grounds, watching bodies decay to shatter the illusion of permanence. But for us, in the modern world, it might be simpler. It might be noticing the wilting of a flower, the soft lines growing around a loved one's eyes, the passing of seasons. Each small death prepares us for the great one. But preparation isn't only philosophical, it's practical. The traditions of Tibetan Buddhism teach the importance of the dying environment, to surround the departing with peace, gentle words, and reminders of compassion. Many dying masters have spoken of how the final thoughts, the final emotions, imprint on the consciousness as it leaves the body. A mind filled with anger, regret, or fear creates ripples that carry into what comes next. But a mind resting in gratitude, in love, in clear awareness moves on with ease. This is why we practice letting go. Not only when things fall apart, but every day. Letting go of grudges, of imagined slights, of the endless craving for more. Each small act of release strengthens our ability to face the ultimate release, death itself. And perhaps most beautiful of all is the Buddhist teaching that one can help others die well. By sitting at their side, holding their hand without clinging, by whispering words of peace, by guiding their mind toward loving memories, toward their deepest goodness. In those final hours, as attachments loosen and the veil thins, even a single kind word can be a lantern in the darkness. And when our own time comes, we can carry this wisdom with us, to remember that death is not the enemy, it's not the end, it's a return, a becoming, a crossing of the great river into lands shaped by our own making. What makes a good death then? It isn't about control. It isn't about dying young or old, rich or poor, surrounded or alone. It's about meeting that moment with clear eyes and an open heart. To be able to say, I lived with kindness. I made mistakes and tried to learn. I let go of what I could, and now I am ready. And if we can do that, if we can transform our relationship with death, then life itself becomes richer, freer, deeper. Because the one who no longer fears death has nothing left to lose. And in having nothing to lose, we discover what we never truly possessed in the first place: control. And when we let go of control, what remains is peace. In the next chapter, we'll turn toward one of the most paradoxical and liberating teachings of Buddhism, the truth about the self we've spent a lifetime constructing. Who dies when there was no one there to begin with? If there's a single thread woven through every fear we carry, fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of death, it's the belief in a solid, unchanging self. We live our lives like actors so immersed in their roles. They forget it's just a play. We defend our name, our status, our body, our opinions, as if some permanent I lives behind it all, watching, owning, surviving. And so when death approaches, we panic because what will happen to me, to my story, to everything I've built and clung to for so long. But here's where Buddhism offers one of its most radical, paradoxical, and ultimately liberating insights. There is no permanent, independent self to die, not in the way we imagine. The Buddha called this teaching Anatta, or non-self. It doesn't mean you don't exist at all, but that the thing you call you is a collection, a flowing, changing bundle of conditions. This body, these thoughts, these memories, these desires, each arising for a while, then passing away, like clouds drifting across an open sky. And the more closely you look, the harder it is to find anything fixed, anything you can point to and say, this is me, this has always been me. As the Zen masters would say, show me your original face before your parents were born. The question isn't meant to frustrate, but to wake us up, to help us see that we've mistaken the mask for the wearer, the shadow for the substance. You might ask, but if there's no fixed self, then who dies? And Buddhism's answer is beautiful in its simplicity. The process changes form. The river flows on, even as the banks crumble. Consciousness continues, but not as a solid identity, as a current shaped by causes and conditions, by karma and intention, by grasping and letting go. This is why, in the deepest sense, death isn't annihilation, it's transformation. And when we see through the illusion of a permanent self, the grip of fear begins to loosen. Because what are you afraid of losing? If there was never anything truly separate to begin with, the body returns to the earth, the thoughts fade into silence, the attachments dissolve, and what remains is spaciousness, awareness without edges. It might sound abstract, but it isn't. You can taste it in moments even now, when you lose yourself in the hush of a forest, when laughter erupts so freely, you forget who's laughing, when grief strips away your defenses, and for a heartbeat you touch something raw and timeless. In those moments, the boundaries blur, and you realize you were never as separate as you thought. This is the beginning of fearlessness, not because you've armored yourself against death, but because you've seen it for what it is. A change in the play of phenomena, not the end of you, because there was no fixed you to end. The Buddha didn't teach non-self to confuse or unsettle us, but to free us from the exhausting work of defending an identity, from the terror of loss, and from the endless cycle of craving and fear it creates. The irony is, the more tightly we cling to this idea of me, the more fragile and anxious we become. But when we let go, when we realize we are more like a wave than the ocean, a temporary form of something vast and formless, there's a profound peace. Death no longer feels like falling into nothingness, but returning to wholeness. This is why, in Buddhist practice, we don't just contemplate death. We contemplate the absence of a permanent self, not to disappear, but to live more freely, because the one who no longer fears death, no longer needs to control every moment, to grasp at every pleasure, to recoil from every pain. They can meet life with open hands, and meet death with open eyes. And here's the secret: when you no longer fear death, you no longer fear life. You can love without clinging, grieve without despair, and walk through this world lightly, joyfully, bravely. The old self dissolves, the river carries on, and what's left is boundless. When someone we love dies, the ache is immediate, the absence sharp like a house missing its foundation. We hold their name on our lips, their scent in our memory, their laughter caught in the corners of a silent room. But the question that gnaws at our hearts isn't just where have they gone, it's what can I do for them now? In the Western world, death is often a closed door. The living are told to move on, the dead reduced to names on marble stones. But Buddhism speaks differently. It tells us the connection doesn't end. The thread continues, and there are ways, powerful, gentle, sacred, to ease their passage, to support their journey, and to honor the invisible bond between hearts that neither time nor death can sever. When a being dies, the consciousness, unbound from the body, enters what many Buddhist traditions call the bardo, a transitional state, a liminal realm between this life and the next. In this space, the mind is vivid, sensitive, and swift. Thoughts, intentions, and the residual echoes of past actions have tremendous power, which means the living can help, not by clinging, not by drowning in grief, but through conscious, compassionate action. The Buddha taught that one of the greatest gifts we can offer the departed is merit. Merit isn't a currency or a magic charm. It's the wholesome energy created by acts of kindness, generosity, meditation, and virtue. And like light, it can be dedicated, sent outwards like a lantern over dark waters. When we perform a compassionate act, or recite sutras, or offer food to the poor in a loved one's name, that goodness becomes a bridge, a gentle force easing the fear and confusion of those caught in the bardo's shifting tides. This is why, in many Buddhist cultures, families gather after a death, not just to mourn, but to chant, meditate, and give. They offer meals to monks, release animals, build schools, or plant trees. Every act a message: you are not alone. Your journey matters. May this merit light your path. Even beyond ceremonies, simple daily mindfulness can ripple across realms. When you sit quietly and hold your departed in your heart, not clinging but wishing them peace, that intention carries weight. When you let go of anger, when you forgive old wounds, when you live kindly in their memory, you send a silent blessing into a world we cannot see, but are forever connected to. And it's not only about helping them, it helps us too. Death, in the Buddhist view, isn't a thief that steals the past. It's a mirror reflecting the truth of impermanence. The acts we perform for the dead soften our own hearts, remind us of what truly matters, and loosen the grip of ego. When we give, we let go. When we let go, we find peace. The ancients believed that those in the bardo can sense the thoughts of the living, that our prayers, our merit, and our gentle remembrances act like steady hands guiding them through a storm. But even if you set aside the metaphysics, the act of loving, of remembering without grasping, is a form of healing for both sides of the veil. It transforms death from a cold finality into a sacred dialogue, a conversation between this life and the next. And maybe in those quiet moments, when a familiar fragrance drifts through a room, when a bird lands on your window, or a dream carries their face, we glimpse the truth. They're not gone. They're simply on another shore, and every kind, mindful act becomes a wave that reaches them. So don't be afraid. Death is the great teacher, the quiet reminder that nothing lasts forever, that every moment is precious, that life is not a guarantee but a gift. It waits for no one, never knocking politely, but arriving exactly when it will, without warning and without favor. And here lies its ultimate wisdom. To live fully, we must live aware. To truly live, we must understand death, not as a morbid fixation, but as a gentle companion, walking beside us, whispering truths we often ignore. Each breath, each heartbeat, is a chance to awaken, to let go of what binds us, to open our hands and hearts, to step more lightly on this earth. Buddhism teaches us to carry death in our pocket, to hold it gently in our mind, so that the illusion of permanence falls away. Because when we truly accept that death comes for all, we learn to treasure connection, to act with kindness, to forgive, and to love without hesitation. Living with awareness is not about fear. It's about freedom. The freedom to live without regret, to speak our truth, to practice compassion, and to find peace amidst uncertainty. So let death teach you. Let it be a mirror reflecting the beauty of impermanence. Let it guide you to live with purpose, to embrace the present, to cherish every smile, every tear, every breath. As we close this journey together, remember this: the mystery of death is not just a final chapter. It is woven into every page of life, and by understanding it, we unlock the deepest meaning of existence itself. If this exploration touched your heart, if it opened a new way of seeing, please consider subscribing and joining this community. Together we can walk this path, learning, growing, and living with mindful courage. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and may your journey be filled with light and peace.